Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back here on the industry stage at Formnext 2023. We are coming up with another exciting keynote about the topic of sustainability. We just heard a fantastic keynote of the company Equinor with a very nice aspect on circular economy. This is one of the aspects we want to tackle as well, but a lot more regarding additive manufacturing. And in order to do so, we gain an expert, and she's really experienced not only in additive manufacturing in total, but she has a look on it also from a management perspective and realization aspect. So I'm really happy to welcome here on stage Dr. Jennifer Johns from the University of Bristol, and I'm looking forward to her speech. And I just want to remind you, if you have a question, don't be shy. Use our Slido tool and ask the question. I will have it here on my iPad and can ask Jennifer right after her presentation. But now, welcome Jennifer on stage and enjoy her presentation. Jennifer, stage is yours.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks everyone for joining me today. Just waiting for the music to stop. I'm here to offer an insight really from an interdisciplinary team that I'm involved with at the University of Bristol. I'm a professor of management, so I'm very interested in those business models and the business case that underpins a lot of the conversations that we're having around sustainability. And I work with engineers, supply chain management specialists, geographers, and also people working on business models. So what I wanted to do today was to come here and talk to Formnext about some of the bigger picture, the bigger thinking, level thinking about sustainable manufacturing futures. Some of the concepts that we're using in academia and how we're working with industry to try and advance sustainability within manufacturing, particularly with our expertise in additive manufacturing. The slide change is not working. There we go. So I've put in a cliched image of sustainability. It has to be green, it has to have a heart. But I wanted to start by thinking about what we mean by sustainability, because it has many different aspects, and that's something that came out of the panel as well. So the UN defines sustainability as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And I think that's really a reminder about thinking us about the future and the way that we're using resources and that we're not wasting those resources. Today, I wanted to highlight those environmental or ecological sustainability, thinking about our impact on the planet, which is underpinning a lot of our conversations about sustainability. But also there's two others. There's social sustainability, so that's thinking about our workforce and our impact on local communities, and business sustainability. So of course, from a business school, this is of interest to me, that actually some of these may seem to be in conflict, but today I'm going to talk through some examples where they aren't in conflict and they're complementing each other. We can sometimes think that there's a sets of costs around sustainability, and actually there's some ways in which businesses can reconfigure their value proposition in order to make their businesses more sustainable. I sense, as I come regularly every year to Formnext and with my engagement with industry in the UK, that there's that feeling that the general public shares around a sense of inevitability and a pressing need to address sustainability. But how that manifests in different industry environments can sometimes vary. It can vary by the size of the firm, by the sector, by the activities of the firm. But there's also a general sense around pressure, uncertainty, and a distinct lack of guidance and a lack of knowledge sharing between different parts of the industry, between competitors, but also between across manufacturing in general. So I wanted to think about what some of the opportunities are, and this is picking up on the panel's discussion, but also a lot of conversation and examples that we're seeing over in the application stage as well. There's a lot of focus on individual products and companies telling us about things that they've managed to print using AM and how those can be more sustainable. But for me, there's an interesting bigger picture around the narrative that the industry can construct around AM and its ability to help with sustainability. When I think about the use case for additive manufacturing and a lot of the rhetoric that we're already familiar around how and why to use additive manufacturing in general mirrors a lot of the same use case scenarios that we would use around sustainability. So the ability for AM to be produced on demand, so closer to the site of use, so that saves on transportation costs. So that's relocalizing a lot of production. So it could be that we could see more use of AM would help rebalance this current system, this reliance on global factories in particular locations, for example, in China, where we have high logistics costs and waste and use of resources. And this, of course, is also in a broader context of thinking about supply chain pressures and ruptures, which I came and spoke about here last year, a potential regionalization of the global economy that had started before but was accelerated by COVID, reshoring. Often, if firms are thinking about a change of location of supplier, they may, if they're thinking about bringing back production to advanced economies, think about producing them differently. And if they start to think about producing differently, there's a window of opportunity to make the case for using additive manufacturing to produce those products. And also a more politicized global economy at the moment, with lots of talks around national sovereignty and the capability of particular nation states to have more capability, more independence in terms of their manufacturing capabilities. So there are lots of opportunities here thinking at the broader scale. I wanted today to also send two messages really about the levels of sustainability, and to emphasize that sustainability is a journey. It's a journey for us all collectively, but it's also a journey for individual firms. And I think that takes away some of that pressure and that need to get from A to B. And no one firm is going from A to B. The end point is never clear. There's always more we can do. But that all happens in a series of stages. And there are small interventions that you can start doing, and then you can start to build up your knowledge and capabilities. And I see distinct differences and capabilities between large firms and SMEs. I have quite a lot of sympathy, actually, imagining running a small firm and thinking about how you'd have access to the capabilities, knowledge and resources you'd need. So that would be a kind of collective shout to kind of do more knowledge sharing in order to help everyone collectively. You can start by making existing products more sustainable. So that it can be extending the life cycle. We know we can use life cycle analysis in order to capture this information, but making sure we keep products in use. So that's reducing waste, extending the life of products. And AM can be very important there in printing that one thing that might be needed to keep something in use, to stop it going to landfill. Keep them in the system. And I'll go on in a moment to talk about circular economies. Very important in terms of lightweighting as well. We know the advantages of AM in terms of lightweighting, and also the steps that are happening in terms of innovation in materials and making the materials themselves more sustainable. We can also see a role for AM in terms of managing in-use of AM. AM when the product is actually being used. We've just heard mention of digital inventories and also printing spare parts. And I'm going to go on and talk about spare parts and more. Then also thinking more about reuse, recycling and remanufacturing, and how we can design using AM to enable better recycling, better remanufacturing. I'm then emphasizing again this point that sustainability is a journey. Now, the work I've done in AM over years uses a value chain perspective. This is an academic framework that businesses do also use, in which we can understand at the aggregate level how a particular sector is made up in terms of its production stages. So this isn't a supply chain, it's a value chain, and that enables us to understand where value is captured across a particular sector. So this is made up of supply chains. So you can see here, this is any manufacturing sector. You have design, pre-production, production, distribution, retailing, and consumption. And we see here that there's some aspects in which AM can be very important and can change some of those production stages. But the reason that I've highlighted distribution and retailing is there's the potential for innovation in spare parts to totally transform or even completely remove those stages of the value chain. And we hear a lot of talk about spare parts and AM, but I And we hear isolated stories and some progress on this, but certainly in the UK context, very little concrete progress, even though it seems to be one of the most obvious large-scale applications of AM. Also, we can see this being applicable in legacy parts as well. Design is highlighted because I always like to go back to emphasizing design for additive manufacturing and thinking about how design can actually change this whole value chain, using AM in order to make different parts of these chain configured differently. And this also involves often a relocalization of production because you're naturally located closer to the site of consumption. And there's, of course, additional sustainability benefits around reduction of transportation, but also that frees up land that can be used for other purposes and reduces carbon footprint. The amount of land devoted to warehousing in the UK has actually substantially increased over the last few years. Over the last 6 years, the number of warehouses in the UK has increased by 32%, and over the last 10 years, the number of businesses designated as being storage or warehousing has increased by 88%. This is driven by reduction in shopping on the high street, rise of internet shopping, but is also to do with concerns around supply chains because of COVID and Brexit. So this is taking up quite a lot of land in the UK. So the more that we're able to change these value chains, the more sustainable the futures can be. Now, this is a linear journey from design through to consumption, but you will have heard a lot of talk about circular economies. And when we talk about circular economies, we understand these as systems in which we're trying to keep the resources within those systems, materials, flowing in the system and keeping them. And this is an example from work that we've been doing on the construction sector. And we found that there's various points of this circular economy circle in which additive manufacturing can play a role. It can be in terms of the materials that are used, it can be the methods of construction, it can be spare and legacy parts to keep buildings to be used longer, also around renovation and retrofit. And the aim of these circular economies is to stop the loss to landfill and the residual waste. So we want as little of these endpoints going out of the system as possible. And so this is just a quick example to show how additive manufacturing can really have different intervention at different points along this circular economy. And I would argue that the most important way you get the most benefits is when AM is at the design stage, when the architects can understand the technology and design the buildings to better facilitate AM throughout the cycle. Now, when we think about challenges to additive manufacturing and sustainability, I find, again, a lot of this mirrors the general challenges around the adoption of AM. Things around governance and regulation, around material availability, pushing for more work to make more sustainable materials or materials that can be recycled, for example. And work is being done on that, but there's always more that can be done. Process development, the infrastructure, the knowledge, the capabilities, and thinking around if there is a shift in the geographical scale of production, what do we mean by local? The current global economy is constructed, these value chains, around cost, flexibility, and speed. So when you start thinking more sustainability, you really have to start challenging those three drivers that drive how we configure our global value chains. I'm going to use one example, though, to illustrate how we can see differences, more effective differences in a particular sector. We need more supportive industrial strategies. I obviously do a lot of work in the UK. I'm based in the UK, where we've effectively had a vacuum of industrial strategy. So it's very interesting to come and see different people from different countries talking about what exists there. And then reiterating a point I made earlier about the role of different large firms who control large parts of these value chains, and also thinking about the role for SMEs who are connecting into these global value chains in different places and in different ways, and the ways in which support should be targeted to support both those activities. So I wanted to talk about value proposition, and this might seem a bit out there, but I wanted to use this as an example from eco-friendly activewear. So this is a project where we've been tracking 80 firms from North America and Europe over a number of years. And these are all small, disruptive SMEs who are producing eco-friendly activewear. They're often set up by entrepreneurs. And one of the products they make is leggings. So the big question is, how can there be so many black leggings in the world, and how come some of them will sell for $3 and some will sell for $100? The reason is that the firms that are selling for the higher amount are able to construct a value proposition that means that they are able to extract more value, to charge more to the customer. Activewear can be produced on a cost minimization basis, but these firms are disrupting the whole sector and forcing changes in the larger firms, like H&M, for example. And they're using recycled materials in the leggings, but they're also putting substantial work into demonstrating the sustainability criteria of their products. They convince the consumer. We've ejected any firms that are greenwashing, because there are some, and focused on these 80 firms. Most of them are profit-seeking. Some are social enterprises, some are not-for-profit, but most are profit-seeking. And of these 80 firms who are using these more sustainable value propositions, only 3 have folded in the last 4 years. So that level of business sustainability is much, much higher than we would expect to see. We would have expected more than half of those SMEs to have failed over that time, if not more. So they are producing sustainably. They are collecting a lot of data. They advertise their factories. They start either by focusing on their production, where they look at their production waste. They look at the workforce sustainability, how their workers are, the salaries their workers are receiving. They also look at materials and are developing biomaterials, for example, and then are on this sustainability journey. And the work that we're doing is charting that sustainability journey. And they all start with relatively small steps, but with a vision to take them towards being very sustainable. These disruptor firms are also then impacting on the whole sector, and they are succeeding very well. And I wanted to use this as an example of saying how actually there are different value propositions that firms can construct in order to make sustainability central to their products, and that there's not always a tension between profitability and sustainability. I wanted to then just use the last few minutes I have left to tell you about some of the work we're doing. Obviously, have no commercial interest because we're in a university, but we're a very interested group of academics who are doing a lot of work with industry in the UK and beyond. And we have a number of projects, and I would like that the audience would be able to think of us as objective and be able to kind of answer some of the challenges that we're seeing around sustainability by bringing industry together and providing some of those solutions. We have a variety of projects around secure and responsive supply chains, doing work where we're sending people from business schools into businesses to help them understand those investment decisions, those return on investment issues, when you use AM to intervene for sustainability in a supply chain, and building up use cases in order to knowledge share. We also are looking at some of the issues around national security and sovereignty. We've got a project where we're going to be charting the mergers and acquisitions that have occurred across the sector in order to think about increased concentration of ownership of particular technologies can have significant implications for national manufacturing, but also politically as well. And then a big project that I would welcome if anyone is interested in being involved in, but this is something I'll come and speak when we've started to do more work on it, is looking at on-demand manufacturing in southwest England, but really looking at the value chain and looking at the value propositions that firms can use in order to implement these technologies. So really working on those business models, those business cases, to give the data and the information that we can then share more widely with the industry, to give some of those calls for more information, more evidence, more figures behind some of these processes. And thinking about how we could use this to really much more transform value chains in more meaningful ways. So I wanted then to just summarize by saying, developing these processes is a journey. And I think the first step might seem the most difficult, but to keep thinking. Start thinking about simple things like reducing waste on your own shop floor, or thinking about yourself and your business, and then thinking about your business's impact in these wider global value chains. I think there is a very important role for additive manufacturing, and if I compare it to more traditional forms of manufacturing, I think that there are significant opportunities that could give some competitive advantage to additive manufacturing in the right ways. I think design for AM is highly relevant here, and can give us more sustainability, particularly around circular economies. But that involves us changing our mindset and understanding ourselves as part of a circular system, rather than this linear point at which we sell something, it goes, and we don't think about it again. Those leggings companies that I was telling you about are all thinking about how to get that material back to them. And they often have schemes where the material's coming back and they're able to recycle or reuse or resell. So they themselves are managing their relationship with the consumer after the product has been sold. And that's not been part of any conversations that I've heard here. Thinking about materials and material developments is important, but thinking about the future of AM and some of those technological conversations about where we think we should go in terms of technological development, and thinking that actually monomaterials are really important in terms of recycling and in the ability to break down things into their component parts, their component materials, to then reuse them. So any talk about printing and integrating different types of materials, say circuit boards, actually creates some real challenges around circular economies. So at some point we might have tensions between where we should head in terms of sustainability and where we should head in terms of technological developments. And just as I have a few seconds left, I suppose to just say, to start somewhere. Start this journey somehow, and let's hope that we can all share expertise and share knowledge in how to advance that journey more quickly. So my time is up, so thank you very much for listening, and any questions, please.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Awesome presentation. Jennifer, let me start with a question. Probably I'm too not patient enough. So what can we do? Because, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and it's totally reasonable, and I fully understand, and I see the urge of implementing all this. But what can force the companies to think more AM-like and go into thinking and design for AM and go to the point where they produce locally and give the product directly to the end consumer? Because you mentioned these 88% plus warehouses. This is for me the contradictory. This is the opposite of what we want. So what could push companies to think more in AM and go this way?
I think crisis would push them, but that means we've already got too far in terms of the journey we're on in terms of climate change. I think that there is a role for government, but I don't see that happening in the UK. I think that there could be more industry strategies around this. I think that putting the onus on firms is quite challenging in the sense that most firms are trying to survive. So if somebody from a business school sees the very real challenges actually around businesses, but I think that some of my colleagues who are very proactive around sustainability, they would say this has got to happen or these firms are going to fail. So I think it's about those perspectives that the firms have, whether you're thinking short term over the next 1 or 2 years, or whether the firms have the capabilities, the time and the resources to think about further. I think lack of knowledge is probably one of the factors as well. Even realizing that AM is a possibility is probably a big factor for a lot of firms.
And that's probably one of the tasks we have here at Formnext in order to push the news outside. Because, I mean, you mentioned the crisis mode. This is why we have 88% plus warehouses, but this couldn't be the answer in the end. So what could we do in order to push more knowledge? I mean, you do it university-wise. Crisis knowledge transfer is not enough, as we just experienced. So are there any ways you are considering in
Well, one of the big projects is we're developing a methodology where we're going to use a lot of data to map the regional capabilities, the installation base, the land use, imagine these different levels of mapping these capabilities, to also identify where gaps exist in the value chain. So how can a region think about it itself as a system to then encourage the firms in those regions in order to get together, essentially, with lead firms involved involvement, which is important. And then that would be a methodology that could then be adopted anywhere else in the world.
Probably success examples.
Yes.
And this is a project you mentioned with South of England, right? Where you want to have companies trying out what is feasible or not.
Yeah,
So-
but we need international partners as well.
Yeah, I know.
Nothing happens in a container, right? So we need that knowledge as well.
So just encourage all of you, if you have contacts to companies, support this project. I would be heavily appreciating that. Thank you so much,
Thank
Jennifer,
you.
for being our guest and our presentator today. Fantastic presentation, and good luck for the future initiative.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, Jennifer. So I think the two very inspiring speeches make the perfect ground for the upcoming panel discussion. Before we step deeper into our partner region Nordics and their view on sustainability, we will provide you with some more highlights of the Formnext 2023. Enjoy that and see you in a few minutes.